Over the course of his lifetime, George Mueller cared for more than 10,000 orphans. He built 5 large orphan houses. He never once asked anyone for money. He never took out a loan. He never went into debt. He simply prayed and God provided every single time. George Mueller was born in 1805 in Prussia. His early life gave no hint of the saint he would become. As a young man, he was a thief, a liar, and a drunkard. He stole from his own father. He cheated his friends. He spent nights in jail. By every measure, he was heading toward ruin. Everything changed in 1825 when Mueller attended a small prayer meeting in a home in Halle, Germany. There he saw Christians kneeling in prayer with a joy and sincerity he had never encountered. Something broke open in his heart. He gave his life to Christ that night, and from that moment forward, he was a different man. Mueller felt called to serve among the Jewish people and traveled to England in 1829. In Bristol, he became the pastor of Bethesda Chapel, but his heart was increasingly drawn to another calling. Caring for the orphans who filled the streets of Victorian England, children with no parents, no home, and no hope. Victorian Bristol was full of orphaned and abandoned children. They begged in the streets, slept in doorways, and worked in factories under brutal conditions. The workhouses that were supposed to help them were often worse than the streets. Mueller looked at these children and saw not problems to be managed, but souls to be loved. In 1836, Mueller made a decision that seemed insane to everyone around him. He would open an orphan house. He would provide food, clothing, shelter, and education for children who had nothing, and he would do it entirely by faith. He would never ask anyone for money. He would make his needs known only to God. Mueller's decision not to fundraise was deliberate and theological. He wanted to prove that the God of the Bible is real, that he hears prayer, and that he provides for those who trust him. Mueller saw his entire ministry as a living demonstration of God's faithfulness. Every answered prayer was evidence that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was still alive and active. The first orphan house opened on April 11, 1836, with 30 girls. Mueller had almost nothing, but day by day provision came, a donation here, a gift of food there. Clothing arrived just when it was needed. The children never went hungry. Mueller recorded every provision in meticulous journals, creating a permanent record of God's faithfulness. One morning, the children sat down to breakfast and the plates were empty. There was no food in the house. Mueller gathered the children, thanked God for the breakfast he was about to provide, and waited. Within minutes, a baker knocked on the door with fresh bread. A milk cart broke down outside, and the driver donated the milk rather than let it spoil. God had provided again. The work grew rapidly. One house became 2, 2 became 3, more children came, and more provision followed. Mueller never advertised his needs. He never dropped hints in conversation. He never manipulated donors. He simply prayed and trusted. And the money and supplies came, always just enough, always just in time. By the 1840s, Mueller needed a purpose-built facility. He prayed for land and money to build a large orphan house on Ashley Down, a hill overlooking Bristol. The money came in small gifts and large, from the poor and the wealthy, all unsolicited. The first Ashley Down orphan house opened in 1849, housing 300 children. Over the next 2 decades, Mueller built 4 more houses on Ashley Down. By 1870, he was caring for over 2,000 children at a time. The operation required enormous sums. Over his lifetime, Mueller received and distributed over £1 million, equivalent to well over $100 million today, all by prayer alone. Mueller did not simply feed and house the children, he educated them. Every child received a thorough education in reading, writing, arithmetic, and the Bible. He trained them for useful trades. He prepared them for life. When they left the orphan houses, they were equipped not just to survive, but to thrive. Mueller lived simply. He gave away his personal wealth early in his ministry. He and his wife Mary wore plain clothes, ate simple food, and kept nothing for themselves that could be given to others. When donations came that were personally directed to him, he typically passed them on to the orphan work or to other ministries. Mueller's first wife, Mary Groves, was his partner in every sense. She managed the orphan houses with extraordinary skill and devotion. She shared his faith, his sacrifices, and his prayers. When she died in 1870 after 39 years of marriage, Mueller preached her funeral sermon himself, testifying to her faithfulness and to the goodness of God who gave her to him. Mueller kept detailed journals throughout his life, recording every prayer request and every answer. He documented over 50,000 specific answers to prayer, not vague generalities but specific, dated, verifiable provisions. These journals became his most powerful testimony, a written record that God is exactly who he says he is. Mueller's prayer life was fueled by his devotion to Scripture. Every morning before dawn, he would read the Bible not to prepare a sermon but to feed his own soul. He read through the entire Bible over 200 times during his life. He believed that the secret of a powerful prayer life was not technique but relationship, knowing God through his word. The stories of answered prayer are endless, money arriving in the mail on the exact day it was needed. A stranger walking in with precisely the amount required, clothing donated just before winter, a doctor offering free medical care. Each provision came without Mueller asking anyone but God. The pattern was so consistent that even skeptics struggled to explain it away. Mueller's ministry extended far beyond Bristol. He supported over 150 missionaries around the world. He distributed hundreds of thousands of Bibles and Christian books. He funded schools in multiple countries, all by the same method, prayer without solicitation. His faith was not just for orphans, it was for the world. In his 70s, Mueller began extensive preaching tour. Over 17 years, he traveled to 42 countries, preaching to over 3 million people. He shared the story of God's faithfulness, encouraging Christians everywhere to trust God for their needs. He was a living testimony to the power of simple, persistent faith. When asked the secret of his life, Mueller always gave the same answer. It was not his faith that was remarkable. It was his God. Mueller insisted that he was an ordinary man who served an extraordinary God. Anyone could live the life he lived if they would simply trust God and take him at his word. Mueller had critics. Some accused him of endangering children by refusing to create an endowment. Others thought his method was irresponsible, but the results spoke for themselves. In over 60 years of ministry, the children never went without a meal. The bills were always paid. The proof of Mueller's method was the welfare of 10,000 children. George Mueller died on March 10, 1898 at the age of 92. Tens of thousands lined the streets of Bristol for his funeral. He left behind virtually no personal possessions, but he left a legacy that no amount of money could purchase, a life that proved God hears and God provides. Mueller's life asks us uncomfortable questions. Do we really believe God provides? Are we willing to depend on him? Or have we made ourselves so self-sufficient that we never need to pray? Mueller did not live by faith because he lacked alternatives. He chose faith because he wanted to show the world that God is real. George Mueller was not a man of great talent or great wealth. He was a man of great faith in a great God. His life is a standing invitation to every Christian. Stop worrying, start praying, and watch what God will do. 10,000 orphans, 50,000 answered prayers, and one simple secret: God is faithful.